VHS is a found-footage horror film released by Bloody Disgusting on October 5th, 2012. The film is composed of a 6-story anthology with 5 of the stories being viewed from the perspective of the characters introduced in the first. Several notable writers and directors, including Adam Wingard, Joe Swanberg, Ty West, and Radio Silence, contributed to the making of this movie. While a lot of people are quick to write off the found footage style as the cheap trick of the horror movie genre, there still exists a loyal contingent of fans who find the nostalgia generated by unspeakable horrors captured within the grainy feedback of the technology of their younger years a hard thrill to replicate. VHS is proof of such demand, as it not only had a respectable run at the box office, but would go on to spawn a boatload of sequels, a couple of spinoffs, a mini-series on Snapchat, weird choice of platform if you ask me, but to each their own, and a fair amount of respect and admiration from the online horror community. So with that in mind, what does it do to stand out from the rest? Well, in the case of VHS, you have not 1, not 2, but 5 stories within a story, and you tie them all together with some of the most unapologetically degenerate characters you could put on screen. The film opens with a band of petty criminals who we get to know by watching their escapades of vandalism and assault, breaking into someone's house to steal a VHS tape for money. We then watch as they try and figure out which tape they're there for among the literal piles of tapes that need to be searched. The exploits of these thieves are a story in and of itself, and I will admit that given how scummy they all are, their end is brutal but oddly satisfying at the same time. As for the rest of the tapes, they're a bit of a mixed bag in terms of quality. One thing that is consistently good throughout is the visual presentation. The movie nails the aesthetic of the grainy 90s 2000s camcorders and early screen recordings, complete with snippets of taped-over home movies and glitching frames to bolster the presentation. From a cinematographer's standpoint, they are able to make the most of what these mediums have to offer, showing us everything we need to see while perfectly incorporating the zooms, blurs, and shakes that are typical of handheld footage of the time. This visual presentation is rounded out by the entities and the creatures that feature. Almost every short here features a monster or entity of some kind, each with its own unique look and way of interacting with its surroundings. Couple that with some pretty decent blood and guts effects, and you can be sure that if nothing else, you'll be seeing these beasts in your dreams for a while. This is helped greatly by how well paced the movie is. Every tape we watch is more or less equal in how much of the spotlight it's given, with the interludes of the tape thieves searching for their prize tying everything together fluidly. Every story has time to set the stage, build tension, and reach its conclusion, and given how much they pack into the space of 2 hours, that's not something to sneeze at. The acting is where you start to see why this film is a mixed bag. For the most part, the actors are able to give performances that feel pretty natural or are otherwise so bombastic that you can't look away. Like, you see the way they act, and you can see them being in an amateur home tape from the era. But there are some instances where this isn't so much the case. This is apparent in the tapes about a couple on a honeymoon road trip, and a short with several FaceTime sessions of a man comforting his sick girlfriend. The acting in these tapes is noticeably stiffer than the other ones, and while it somewhat works in the context of the story, it oftentimes comes off as lifeless compared to what we see in the other tapes. It's also not helped by the fact that these 2 tapes in particular are weaker from a storytelling perspective. And speaking of which, all of the stories on screen are more or less equal in terms of how much screen time they have, but that doesn't really translate to the overall quality of each short. This is what makes the movie somewhat difficult to fully recommend, as some of the features will keep you at the edge of your seat, eyes firmly planted on the TV screen, while others will decidedly have you slumping back in your seat, eyes firmly planted on your phone screen. The interlude story with the thieves, known as Tape 56, is a definite standout, with each transition between tapes working to build the dread as you slowly start to realize how bad their situation actually is. This intensity is also brought into the tape Amateur Night, where a cohort of dude bros head out for a night on the town with a pair of spy glasses and a mission to bring home some hotties. But their encounter with a seemingly shy and distant loner leads to a massacre in which we learn that the loner they brought home with them is not what she seems. These two stories keep the momentum going the further along you get, and they do a good job of keeping you invested in what's to come. But that can't be said for the tapes The Sick Thing That Happened to Emily When She Was Younger and Second Honeymoon. The premise of the Emily tape is an interesting one, but it doesn't make the most of it, and what initially comes off as a paranormal encounter is revealed to be an elaborate quarantine scenario where the woman being haunted is actually infected with a parasite that is being studied by her boyfriend, who is really the preceptor overseeing her containment. While this short offers a lot of food for thought conceptually, it rushes through the best part of the story without building on it in any meaningful way. It's also being viewed as a series of FaceTime calls on a computer, which, while well shot for what it is a bit harder on the eyes compared to the other tapes. This trend continues in the Honeymoon tape, in which the acting, while more natural, still feels somewhat stiff. And the story comes to a rather sudden conclusion, which, while believable in context, also ends up feeling like wasted potential for the slow burn psychological horror that it was setting itself up to be. The tapes Tuesday the 17th and 10/31/98 fall somewhere in the middle. For the most part, Tuesday the 17th plays as a generic friends in the woods haunted by an unseen killer trope, complete with unbridled horniness, blatant disregard for mutilated corpses on their path, and the final girl being terrible at exacting the revenge she was so eager to claim. Like, literally the whole reason she's up there is to take down the monster that murdered her friends so many years ago. And the best she can come up with is hoping the thing will run into one of her Viet Cong booby trap contraptions. Like, lady, if you were as well prepared to kill this thing as you claimed you were, you would have hit it with a big iron the minute it crept up on your friend. Or maybe you lure him into some 30-foot deep pit, then bury it in concrete or sulfuric acid or magnets or whatever the hell you're supposed to do to counter this literal glitch in the Matrix. The only thing that really does save this skit for me is how interesting the glitch monster is, and how depraved it is once it claims its victims. 10/31/98, the last tape of the bunch, plays like a generic haunted house story. Or at least it seems that way until our heroes escape the house. They risk life and limb to save a helpless girl from a sacrificial cult and the spooky ghost arms in the walls of the house they end up in. And how does she thank them? By revealing she was a ghost all along and using her spoopy ghost powers to lock her rescuers in their own car until they get flattened by a train. Such is life for the do-gooders in horror movies, though. The final point to make is not so much a gripe as it is a warning. This is an amateur-style R-rated horror movie, and with that comes a copious amount of swearing, violence, gore, casual drug use, and a liberal application of full frontal nudity. So, yeah, movie's got that. Do what you want with that information. The final rating for this vintage rewind into depravity is 6 out of 10. With an interesting plot concept and a nostalgic visual presentation to complement it, this movie is held high by its memorable monsters and the gory spectacle they bring with them, but sinks low due to a lack of consistent acting and storytelling quality across the board. If you're looking for some low-stakes background noise for your upcoming Halloween party, then VHS might just be worth a look. Hello there. I know a lot of you have discovered my channel during a particularly dry spell, coming in here as a result of the what-if rewrites I made for classic movies. I am sorry for the lack of activity here. I've kind of been going through a lot this past year, switching jobs, returning to school, and just not being in the best place mentally. But just so you know, I am not dead, and I will be releasing a review every day for the month of October as a means of making sure I don't lose my ability to edit while I deal with everything else. And yes, I am still working on the next rewrite. Several of them, in fact. And I have to admit, some of the projects are turning out to be much larger in scale than I anticipated. But I will say, going into the new year, you can expect a lot more of that kind of content to come your way. Thank you all for joining me here. I really am grateful to you all for coming along and indulging in this little hobby of mine. And as always, whenever you're ready to return for more, I'll see you when I see you.